Welcome to Coleman Report Live. I'm Bob Coleman, and we're talking Main Street and the small business lenders who help it grow. Delaney, good to see you. Lance is off today, and we have a special guest, Sarah Briscoe, lead commercial statistical analyst. I love the title, Sarah. We've had you on in the past. We love your stuff. It is great data on what small business loans, what Equifax is predicting their performance. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Bob. Happy to be on.
We're going to start with our Fraud Friday. We have a huge Fraud Friday story, Sarah. So I'm going to let you and Michael try to get you on camera. Hopefully we can do that. Let's go with Delaney. Delaney, I believe this is one of the largest fraud PPP stories when the history is written that will be out there. Over 100 Broward Sheriff employees received a PPP, applied for a PPP loan. Yesterday, 17 were indicted, law enforcement, all badged, 2 sergeants, deputies, their detention center, and sheriff officers. Delaney, tell us more.
I am in full agreement. This is quite the story. Even hour by hour, there's been more information, so it's been very interesting to keep up with. So I believe Thursday, they all showed up in court. In the main Broward Sheriff's office, their front doors were closed to the public as this was all occurring, and they were being indicted. But this is kind of a crazy story. As you mentioned, 100 people got PPP loans.
No,
and
well,
they're
let me correct you.
Yes, applied.
They applied.
My mistake.
But still,
Thank
we
you for
understand
catching
that.
that.
Problem. But go ahead. I'm stepping all over.
There are people from the office estimating possibly 50 to 70 people in total. I do want to commend the Broward Sheriff's Office because this all began with one individual they were investigating, and they found signs of PPP fraud, found some other leads, and they decided, hey, we're going to investigate every single person in this office, about 5,500 people, over 5,000. That's a lot. Didn't matter what title they had, they were all being investigated, and that's how they caught these 100. Additionally, I also want to commend them because they decided to start with just 17 individuals. Because once you indict somebody, that is a life-changing decision, and you can never take that damage back. So they said, we want to be 100% sure before we start pulling people into this process. So I think they're doing a great job, and I think they're really setting a good example.
Delaney, do we know how much the total fraud is?
Thus far, I believe with the 17 individuals, they were saying about $500,000.
So these are small loans. These are small loans that they're going to.
I believe roughly, around 20,000 is going to be the average loan size.
What was the money used for? How many fancy cars do we have?
It is ongoing, and that information is not quite disclosed, but they have mentioned possible cars, clothes, even cosmetic surgeries. Some of the typical things we've seen in the last 2 years.
The sheriff, Sheriff Tony, do you know his full name is? Tony, I believe is his last name. Is that correct?
You will have to forgive me. I was saying at the beginning, I have quite a few different tabs open.
Well,
Sheriff Gregory, Tony.
All right, we'll go with Sheriff Tony. He made it pretty clear. What's going to happen to these 17 individuals?
Yes, I got 2 different quotes from the press conference they held yesterday. He said, I'm not going to sugarcoat or dance around this. At the end of the day, they will be gone. If they're being criminally charged, there's no place for them in this organization. And then he said, this one here is a no-brainer. How could we have anyone out here wearing a badge that is stealing from the American people?
Yeah. So we've gone through, the Sheriff's County, Delaney did a very good job of scrubbing their websites. We were only able to find 2 pictures on LinkedIn. This is a deputy, Anthony is one of them. And the other one is Deputy Lawhorn. And both of these are Department of Law Enforcement, which means they're part of the sheriffs. We have all 15 listed. We can go through that. But basically, what did each of these do? Okay, Michael, stop. You're giving me a headache.
To keep it simple, again, there's not a lot of information, but they applied for PPP and EIDL. They were using allegedly false information about, business income, number of employees, possibly fake forms and documents. And again, a lot of them were about what we've seen, 17,000, 20,000, somewhere in that range.
Yeah, it was a combination of PPP and EIDL. The inspector, the U.S. attorney for Southeast Florida, which includes Broward County, Miami, which is where this is out of, said he did not believe there was a conspiracy, but obviously a lot of people talked. And there will be more indictments. They started with the badged people, and they're going to go to, I think you had the quote in your reporting this morning, then they're going to go for the civilians.
Yeah. Hey, and I do want to say, when you investigate such a large group of people, 5,500, you're bound to find some things you don't like. So I can't say I'm necessarily super surprised. I feel like if you investigated any major group of people, you'd probably find a couple bad actors in there.
Internal suspensions began last week with uniforms, guns, and badges being taken away. So that is, they're, as you said, he made it very clear there's a due process, there's unions involved, but they'll go through the process and they will be gone. I mean, he didn't sugarcoat that at all. He was very, very clear on that. What's interesting to me on this is, and he alluded to another fact, that while the U.S. attorney said there was no conspiracy, he said there appeared to be discussions about talk to so-and-so and they'll do the paperwork, you'll get the money in a week. That's a pretty enticing offer. And we don't know who that person is yet, do we, Delaney?
We don't. It's pretty well under wraps so far. It's quiet.
Yeah. So they went after that. To his credit, the sheriff did say there was one PPP loan that on the surface they thought they were a criminal, and they did their due diligence and they found out that the sheriff had a legitimate business, that they had legitimate employees, and that person is still working for the department. So they clearly understand that. The other thing I liked, and the sheriff, I thought, I enjoyed his analysis. Obviously, when these things happen, they go right to the top. He's doing a very good job in keeping his job, and he repeated the Marco Rubio line. The senator from Florida was saying, "Hey, there should have been guardrails. We understood that. We understood this was he used the term an honor system, but we had to get the money out. We were in the face of an economic devastation crisis, and we had to get the money out to keep people employed. So we understood that." And then he said, we're going to go after those bad actors. And while he said, Delaney, that we're going to go whether it's 1, 2, or 5 years, this is a significant different response by the Department of Justice than during the Great Recession, where cases dragged down for 10, and even there was one that was settled earlier this year. So anyway, I'm going to give you the final word on this, and we're going to bring Sarah in. You've covered a number of these stories. For those of you who don't know, Delaney is I hate to call her an intern. She's much more than that for us, but she's going to school full time. Delaney, tell us what you're studying, what you want to do with that study, and how does this case apply? It's a fascinating story, what you're doing for us.
Well, my relationship with school is ever evolving. I'm getting a master's degree.
You're allowed to do that.
Yeah, I'm getting a master's degree in criminology and criminal justice. I'm focusing on forensic linguistics, but I will also, starting in the spring, so here in January, I will be studying behavioral crime analysis. So this would especially apply with behavioral crime analysis.
Well,
it really is.
I need you to come back in 3 or 4 years and explain to us on behavior, on why people, and go ahead, bring up one of them, Michael. They've been in the department for 20 years, why they would risk everything for $20,000 and risk their career. I mean, What's your initial theory on that, Delaney?
Hopefully one day I could give you a stronger answer. I'm not really sure why somebody would toss 17 years for $20,000, but I think a lot of people had this perspective. Oh, it was easy to get this. We're not going to get caught. I mean, why not?
Greed.
Yeah.
Greed. No, it's too bad. And a lot of people are going to be hurt. And on one hand, I'm sympathetic, but on the other hand, this costs you and I and the taxpayers a lot of money. And for them to do that is putting a black mark on the program. And based on history, we're going to have other economic crises in the future. And the government, I thought, did an excellent job of responding to this one. And we cannot jeopardize having the government respond in the future, whatever type of crisis we have, because we will have some other type of crisis, maybe not during the sunset of my career, but certainly in yours, Delaney. Anyway, fascinating stuff. Thank you very much, Delaney. Let's bring in Sarah. I'm going to talk about what's going on with small business lending portfolios. Sarah, do we have you on camera, or we just have you audio today?
I don't know that we figured the camera out, but
That's fine.
we tried.
Go ahead. This is great stuff. Tell us what you got for us.
Sure. So the economy is a bit of a mix right now, as you may be aware. So there's some growth early in the year, like the jobs report has been really strong. So we're still seeing some lending growth. If you look at it like on a real basis, compared to inflation, it's more like flat than actually growing, but it's not a lending disaster. There's still decent volumes, and the banks are tightening their credit quite a bit, but the demand is still there for loans.
I'm very interested, Sarah, on small business delinquency. Am I reading this right? That delinquencies are up 28% over last year, small business loan delinquencies?
Yeah, delinquency and default have been going up quite a bit for quite a while. And in particular, the transportation industry has the most severe increases. We'll be able to talk a little more about that later, but yeah, delinquency has been going up 31 to 90 days past due, and default 91 days past due or worse. That's actually increased, since mid last year, the default index, and we're projecting it to continue to increase for at least the next year.
Please go ahead. I don't mean to step on you. Please finish.
No, it's okay. So as I said, the high interest rates, there's still some pretty good demand for lending, even though you have these higher borrowing costs and some tightening up from lending institutions. The default and delinquency, as you said, is just continuing to rise. In particular, the consumer spending is a concern that's going to cause even more delinquency as the spending kind of pulls back. That we're not expecting great increases in that. And small business owners are sort of anticipating that. In most surveys, if you look at the surveys of small business owners, they're expecting business conditions to worsen in the future, and their sentiment is pretty low on that. So when we look at lending by industry, the biggest drops are going to be transportation and agriculture. Transportation really expanded a lot. You think about the pandemic, like people were not spending on services. People were spending on goods. You got a new TV, you got a new washer, dryer, a dishwasher, something. And now the good spending is pulling back. Stores have more inventory. They don't need the shipments. So there's quite a correction in transportation right now. And we'll see that in default and delinquency too.
So Sarah, I want to be clear. So your small business lending index, this is the amount of lending that these industries have received, correct?
Yeah, this is the dollar volume change
Very good. Okay.
from last month and from last year.
So healthcare obviously is increasing. Go back one slide. Healthcare is increasing. Very interesting. Entertainment, recreation is huge. Educational services. That's interesting that that lending sectors have increased. Go ahead, Sarah. Here we
Yeah,
go.
we touched a little bit on delinquency as well. So you can see like this is our trend from 2005 to today. You can see the recession, Great Recession, all the way up to like 3.5%. This is 31 to 90 days past due rates. And then things were good for a while, for a long time. And then we had a big increase, sharp increase in the pandemic. And then, you know, accommodations started to happen with lending institutions and PPP funding and all sorts of money flowing into the economy. And so that delinquency rate drops almost to an all-time low. And that's kind of where we were, like in 2021, 2022. And now you can see that correction back up since like mid 2022, where we're sitting now above where we were in 2019 before the pandemic. So it's kind of a shock to the system that, you know, lending institutions, there's a concern about the lending, about the delinquency increase and how long it's going to last and how severe is it going to be. We don't expect it to be as severe as, you know, the Great Recession. As you see, those numbers are wildly different, but it's definitely gonna, we expect it to top a little bit the pandemic or be around that level that we saw. And then this is the year-over-year change where you can see it's been increasing since 2022, and it slowed down a tiny bit in the last couple of months, but it's still, you know, 30% over what it was last year. By state, so we've actually seen some of these like northern states like Montana, North Dakota, not as much of an increase there, but we've seen some severe increases in the West and also the East Coast. You can see in red, this is the change from last year in delinquency. So the more red it is, the more severe it is. This is by industry, 31 to 90 days past due rate. So the scary blue line is transportation. Where you can see it's now topped past the pandemic increase in delinquency rates. And again, we don't expect that it's going to level off quite yet, at least until next year. We have some projections we can talk about at the end too. But all the other industries are increasing as well. It's just a little more stable. Construction's actually a lot more stable, at least more stable than it was during the last recession. There's kind of waning. It's tough. Residential construction is really tough right now because of interest rates and mortgage issues. There's actually was an increase in housing starts for new construction recently, which was sort of surprising in this quarter. But in terms of like existing homes and construction, that sort of thing, that's going to be your majority of the work, and that's where we don't see so much action happening. The default index, so this is like 90 days past due or worse. So it could be a bankruptcy, it could be like repossession or some other negative activity is going to trigger a business to enter into the default index. So these are annualized default rates. And we're coming up on like 2.8% in terms of default rates currently, but it's a very different story on the industry basis. And we're still below the pandemic index value, which is good. And this one has increased about 50% over last year. So it is quite it's a big increase. I mean, it's rapid. And it can be surprising if your business isn't ready, right, to see those default rates rising. And if you're not ready with your collection strategies to, it can come out, and we're seeing that in some of the consulting that I do with institutions. They want to know, like, oh, what is everyone else doing? Are they suffering like I'm suffering? And
Right.
sometimes it's the case and sometimes not. It just depends on how ready you are to weather that storm. Okay, so these are the index values by state. So you can see like the actual default rate by state. So you could almost cut the country in half.
Right.
Like the northern states are doing okay, have a lower default rate. And then if you look at almost the entire like southern piece of the US is seeing much higher default rates than those northern states. Yeah, and this is the year-over-year change. So the more severe the red is, the more the increase was. Obviously, from the charts that we just looked at, every state has had an increase in the default rates from last year. So that's why there's a lot of red on this. But transportation is going to be your biggest factor causing the greatest increases because it's just so sharp.
Yeah, and those are eye-popping numbers, Sarah.
Yeah, it's
Let's go.
very
We're running out of time. Let's go to the last page real quick and give us projected what's going on. I like this.
Yeah. So these are the default projections, 2018 through 2022 actuals. So the 2020 actuals was around 3.3%. We're projecting to hit just below that, 3% in 2023 when all is said and done.
Wow.
And above that by about 1 percentage or 100 basis points to 4.3%.
Wow.
And you see the projection for transportation 6.3 and next year 7.4.
7.4. Is that the peak? If we went to 2025, what would those numbers look like?
We're expecting it to sort of level off.
Okay.
The increase is quite sharp here, but
Right.
I don't see it rising significantly higher past that. It'll likely level off, but it'll take some time to come back down. It's
Sarah,
not.
Yeah. This is great stuff. I definitely want to have you back and explain more about it in the future. Thank you so much. That is basically you're saying buckle up for 2024. So thank you for those insights and that data. All that data is in the dashboard. And you can click on that. If that's a problem, send an email to mike@colemanreport.com. Thank you for joining us today for Coleman Report Live and for supporting America's Main Street, one entrepreneur at a time.
Have a nice weekend.
NPCs or not.